I'm sure that we've all observed how some people can have the most ridiculous ideas that may be illogical or irrational or just factually unfounded, and in some cases perhaps even dangerous or destructive, and yet they can speak with such conviction and confidence even in spite of being wrong. And it's often the most outspoken, the people who shout the loudest, the people whose voice is most heard above others, the people who are the most adamant, that oftentimes really have no idea what they're talking about. They haven't really thought it through. They haven't really taken the time to understand, to investigate, to examine. Due to their own arrogance, they fail to see the flaws in their own arguments, or maybe they simply refuse. And what is unfortunate is that so many others mistake their confidence for certainty or authority or infallibility, and with the same unfounded conviction repeat and regurgitate the very same nonsense. Bertrand Russell once said that the problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are so full of certainty, while the wise are so full of doubt. But he wasn't suggesting that having doubt is the problem. The problem is having a false sense of certainty. In fact, he made the point that doubt is what makes one wise, because in order to learn anything, you have to begin with the premise that you don't already know. To be able to acknowledge and admit your uncertainty is indeed wise, because if you simply accept something as truth or as fact without verifying it, without having real certainty, or if you simply make an assumption without taking the time to verify it, then you may never actually find out what is true. As soon as you've convinced yourself that you're certain of something, you don't look any further. You close yourself off from the possibility of actually finding out. In fact, if underneath that false sense of certainty there is even the slightest doubt, it's likely that you're going to avoid acknowledging it because you've already established your opinion, your viewpoint, your conviction, and the ego is very invested in that sort of thing. We don't like to entertain our doubts because if it turns out that we're wrong, that might destroy your credibility, your reputation, your pride, your sense of superiority, or whatever it is that you're getting out of thinking that you have it already figured out. But when we refuse to admit when we're wrong, we usually wind up looking all the more foolish. No one likes to admit when they're wrong. I don't like it. I'll do it, but I won't like it. And the reason why we don't like it is because of our pride, because of our ego, and because we think that if we admit to being wrong, people might lose respect for us. But the funny thing is, at least in my experience, when someone is unwilling to admit when they're wrong, that's when I lose respect for them, especially when they double down. But on the other hand, when a person is willing to own up to it, that's when they gain more respect from me. I respect a person more just for having the honesty and integrity to admit their mistake, more than I respect someone for simply being right about something. I mean, it's a good thing to be right, but it's admirable to admit to being wrong. And of course, there might be some people who might rub it in your face, even though you've willingly admitted your mistake. There are some people who get off on the fact that you were wrong. They get all puffed up about it. But that's just their own ego. Some people need to deflate others in order to feel inflated. And that's just coming from their own personal insecurities. Just like you have your insecurities, they have theirs. Everyone has their insecurities. So it takes a bit of courage to admit when you're wrong, or you made a mistake, or that you just don't know something. But it's even better to begin by acknowledging your uncertainty from the beginning. If you don't act as if you're certain, then it's a lot easier to admit to being wrong. True wisdom arises in recognition that we don't know everything there is to know. And learning always begins by acknowledging our own ignorance. So it's always best to approach things with this understanding. It's important to question things, to investigate, to try and look from various angles in order to gain a broader, more well-rounded perspective. And this includes questioning our own preconceived beliefs and assumptions, being willing to re-examine these things, willing to listen even to opposing viewpoints, and to consider that we might be mistaken. Or at the very least, we might only be seeing one part of a larger picture. There's an old African proverb that says, "The wise never know all, only fools know everything." And a similar Zen proverb that says, "The fool who knows he is a fool is not the biggest fool." There's no shame in being ignorant if by ignorance we mean simply not knowing something, simply lacking in knowledge or information. And no one knows everything, which means that we're all ignorant to some degree. But no one is more foolish than the person who refuses to accept this regarding themselves. In fact, it could be said that arrogance is often just ignorance disguised as confidence. A person who is arrogant is a person in denial of their own ignorance. And a person in denial of their own ignorance remains in ignorance. So again, wisdom begins by acknowledging our own ignorance, by acknowledging our own uncertainty, and having the willingness to explore, to examine, to inquire, and investigate. If you find value in this content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe.